This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
Another thing is people give because they want to know and feel that they've made a difference. And it's our job to find that. What is that hook? And that means different things to different people.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Peggy Calhoun, Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive and President and CEO of Miller, Calhoun and Company. Hello, Peggy. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Thank you for having me, Jen.
So, Peggy, you've been running a consulting firm for more than 25 years, and I know you recently received your AFP Chapter's Lifetime Achievement Award. So before we jump into capital campaigns and all that stuff, I'm hoping that you'd be willing to share your backstory. How did you get into fundraising, and what is it about consulting that you like so much to stay with it?
Well, sure. I've been fundraising for more than 4 decades. And it all started back in high school when my guidance counselor asked me what I wanted to do and college and what to what program to put me in. I have 4 college degrees, but counseling is one of them. And because I wanted to help people. I have a degree in counseling, and shortly after graduating, I ended up running a suicide prevention line for the Arklemas area, and I was to take it 24/7, and I was the only employee. So I needed resources and people and internships and money and all kinds of things. So that's how I got started. And why I like consulting is simple, because I get to help more people.
You had the suicide prevention. What happened there? And then how did you get to your next spot?
Well, I was noticed by the local United Way. And since I wanted to become a United Way agency in all of that whole geographical area, which included more than one United Way, one of the execs talked me into taking a look at a program. And then next thing I know, I'm talking to somebody from United Way of America. They recruited me and they put me in Sarasota. And 6 months later, I was running that United Way and its foundation. And so it's been very rewarding working with the top leadership in any community for great projects.
That's a wonderful story. What a career story right out of college. That's fantastic. So I'm curious to jump into capital campaigns. What do you see as some of the biggest changes in running a capital campaign from when you first started in fundraising?
So I worked for United Way, for 2 different United Ways for 5 years. And what I noticed is that these out-of-town consultants would come and they would run these capital campaigns for agencies, but they would actually leave before the last 15 or 25% of the goal was realized. And everyone knows the last part of the goal is the hardest to raise. And so these would spin the agencies into deficits, and they would come and ask and say, we need more money. We can't keep the lights on. We can't serve more clients, et cetera. And so I said, well, someday I'm going to design the right feasibility study to ask the right questions and not do that. So what I do in feasibility studies now, and I hope it's a standard practice, is that I look for not only your first few major key gifts, right, but also your last 10% of the campaign goal, because you want to assure a smooth transition. The shorter the campaign, the lower the costs are in fundraising and in overhead. And so I've done, over 150 feasibility studies, and about that same number been involved in that many capital campaigns. So some of the things that have changed over the decades was wealth screening now is a big thing. I don't see it being used as well as it could be in shops, but it used to be called geodemographic thermal overlays back in the 80s. And basically, banks, financial institutions were the only ones that had this technology to be able to sort you out to say, okay, you can get the gold card, offer for the credit card, and we'll send the regular credit cards to all the others. Well, obviously, technology has evolved over the decades, and we use that. Other changes, in particular, is a cryptocurrency, which is really exciting because I just read an article by the nonprofit Times, I believe, that if you're trying to reach cryptocurrency givers, the best platform, believe it or not, is Twitter. And we never thought of that social media being a platform to attract what we would consider major gifts, because right now crypto was earlier in the year was up to 30,000 a coin. Usually that's a major gift in most shops. And other things that I've seen over the years is what I call transformational giving. And these are not just $1 million, but the multi-million. You see Mackenzie Scott giving transformational gifts. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett began that change of transformational giving when they announced the Giving Pledge and started to encourage a lot of other families to give most of their money away while they're still alive, rather than pass it down to other generations and not nonprofits. So there's been quite a lot of changes, as well as technology, and COVID also taught us how not to work near each other. And now we have to relearn to working near each other and reestablishing not only your coworker relationships, but also reestablishing donor dialogue face to face and with events and meeting.
That's a lot of changes over the past years. And I don't always think about how the changes in fundraising affect campaigns. It's interesting you mentioned the cost. It just didn't occur to me that if a campaign drags out, it's going to have much greater costs. You have the campaign manager, you have additional major gift officers.
And you have additional mailings, and you have additional staff costs and meeting costs. And there's a certain amount of leadership and staff burnout as well. Then you have to relook at it. And believe it or not, after I left United Way, I worked for 4 of their great United Way agencies, actually cleaning up stalled capital campaigns. And they stalled because consultants left town and they didn't know what to do. And so because I knew of the community resources and I knew some of the leadership, it was easier for me to talk to them than somebody who didn't know them. And so that was easy for me to do. And I had ended up working for the Boy Scouts and the Salvation Army and the YMCA, just some really great organizations that had wonderful training programs. That's how I learned a lot of the special techniques and tactics that we use today in interpersonal communication with donors.
That's interesting. One of the things that I've noticed over the years, many times a nonprofit will come to me after the campaign is stalling and the consultant has left. And that's when we'll do a well screening or other data analysis to look at, well, what do we do now, right? Here we are years later. And what I've seen is that a donor will be asked for a gift because it fits in the campaign table for the consultant, but it's not a good expression of the relationship. So they're usually under asking.
And then they don't meet their goal.
Right.
And so that's why the quiet phase is important. Careful targeting is important. Fundraising is about relationships and teamwork. What you need to do is match up the right team, which is usually a team of 2 or 3 people, with the right major gift prospect or the key gifts. A study process is important because then I explain the project. And then I'm not asking, but if asked, would you support this and at what gift level? And let's say the prospect says $1 million. And I know that the organization wanted 2 million. I have to record and log the information. And then when I discuss this prospect, one of the strategies that we could use later in the campaign is to say, I know we did not earn the right yet to ask you for the largest transformational gift in our history of our organization. And I'm only here today to ask you for that first lead gift of $1 million. But would you please consider that last 10%, that last $1 million on a matching basis for our campaign. So you could not only kick it off, but you could help us really grow and end the campaign on a high note.
Well, that's neat. That's sort of permission based, right?
You only have one last 10%, right?
Yes.
In one of the campaigns I worked with, there was the foundation chair, which was a family foundation, said, "Can I get another foundation to join me in the last 10%?" I go, "Well, that depends if they're on our prospect list or not." And we laughed. And when he told me the name, it was somebody in the family that didn't even live in the state. I said, "Go for it." So that was a nice story, and it all worked out well.
It's interesting, all the things that have changed, but I'm curious, Peggy, if there are things that haven't changed about capital campaigns across the years.
No, that's interesting. It's relationship based. That hasn't changed, but it's important to understand to maintain that relationship through the pledge payout period and beyond. I've seen that usually if somebody pledges 5 years, the trend is to pay it off early in 2.5, 3 years, or with gifts of appreciated stock or bonds or property. But staff professionals were too busy raising money that we don't really give stewardship that much thought. And with every quarterly pledge due date, you should provide them with an investment report or a touch point or something to say, since you've attended the groundbreaking, these enclosed pictures are where we are at in the building, expected to be completed by X date. You'll be getting a save the date card. So as you send out pledge reminders, you can continue the stewardship. And why even send it out when you can maybe deliver it with a personal mug or at an event, that type of. And when during COVID, it was really cute. Some of my friends who are major gift officers were delivering cookies to their donors as a stewardship touch point, and didn't want to go in, but they know that they would be there and they were waiting for the cookies. So that's always a nice touch point. Stewardship should never be an afterthought and should always be part of the budget. I see it more and more now, but I haven't seen that in the past as much as I've seen it now. A couple things that haven't changed: the lead donor, the lead gift is most likely to be what I call among your agency's family. And that is somebody who's near your best and brightest donor, or one of a founder perhaps. Another thing is people give because they want to know and feel that they've made a difference. And it's our job to find that. What is that hook? And that means different things to different people. Do they feel good about helping a senior citizen? Or is it that child to be able to see again? So we have to know what makes the donor tick. And our job is to show them firsthand, if necessary, how their investment makes that difference. People give to people they know, trust, and respect, such as a fellow classmate if you're operating a school campaign, a family member, or a colleague. There's a cause that would have that they would have personal knowledge of, let's say, a medical issue, if they were homeless at one point or close to being homeless, that you may not know right away, and it doesn't surface in wealth screenings. But it's only through relationships and donor dialogue are you going to get to understand that donor better. And probably the last thing is that when the pledge is paid off and you've done stewardship correctly, it's a very natural way to talk about a legacy gift. In fact, they probably already have included you in their estate plans, but never told you. Upon the last pledge payment, you should be ready to talk to them about a legacy gift and what they would like to leave to show others how much they cared about this institution.
So it sounds like what hasn't changed is that people are human beings, and they have, there's this psychology. Dr. Russell James does a lot of research on what triggers good feelings about giving or bad feelings. He tends to be focused on planned giving. But one of the things he said reminded me of your story about the stewardship of the pledge payments. And that is that it's an opportunity to make them feel great about that gift over and over again, which is so powerful. I love that you brought that out.
Well, it's important because if you're not careful, your accounting department is going to be sending out the now due date, 250,000 in a window envelope if you're not careful. And I've seen that mistake happen a lot.
That would be unfortunate for sure. Researchers are often focused on these moves and stages and the correct portfolio balance. We talk about this stuff, but there comes a point when there's a limited number of names that one gift officer can have in their portfolio. We can't just put the stewardship off to the side and let the accounting department send out those notices. Whether it's creating a donor relations position at that level of talking to these major gift donors or something. But yeah, the stewardship piles up. And when we do these rebalancing efforts, we have to be careful not to lose the human touch with those donors.
Well, sure. One of the things is that if you had a leadership change of your president or your headmaster, and obviously there was a search committee created, who sits on the search committee? Chances are were some of your major donors. And so that information needs to be transferred into the donor database. So as their last payment pledge comes, I think it would be a good time to go with your new president or your new headmaster to go see and thank them and talk about their vision for the next 10, 20 years. And again, introducing legacy giving.
Yes, absolutely. Wonderful segue. So before I let you go, do you have any top tips or resources for development officers or researchers who are looking at a possible capital campaign down the line?
Oh, sure. So my favorite one is it's never too early to plan. You need a strategic long-range plan. And for some boards, they'd rather go to the dentist than go through a board retreat for long-range plan. But your case for support is based on those projections that are overlaid with figures that are overlaid with all the wonderful costs that blended for you to be able to validate and come up with an extremely motivating case for support. This is really critical. Now, while the long-range planning process is going, you as the individual professional could read a lot of books on capital campaigns, take courses, reach out to other fellow professionals who have done capital campaigns, begin collecting ideas on recognition. We've served over 350 nonprofit institutions in the 27 or 28 years our company has been around. And a lot of them are repeat clients because, oh yeah, we did the first campaign, let's do the next one. And that's a lot of fun because sometimes as your staff changes, institutional knowledge isn't always there. So it's important that you look at your records, and that I was just explaining to someone earlier today that your donor database is literally the backbone of your campaign department. And that needs to be accurate and updated. And don't wait for a stall moment in a campaign to do a wealth screening. Do it early. And then make sure your communications and your branding and your development is all working together. If it's not, it needs to be, and it needs to hum before you go out and ask for major gifts or during the quiet campaign. And you've got to work with other department heads and other staff members to get them feeling comfortable that they may have to go on calls with you to explain their program. Or when you're doing a tour and a foundation officer stops and asks them a question, what are some of the common questions they're going to ask? You have to help build your team and prepare them and keep them informed. It's kind of funny because you've heard the old saying that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes an army to reach out to your major potential donors and your transformational givers. It's not done solo. It's teamwork. It's every bit of teamwork. And that brings me up to the strongest element in a capital campaign is leadership followed by a strong and motivating case for support. And if leadership who have gone through that strategic planning phase understands the numbers and understands why you need a building this size in that location and how much it means for the future, and with that building maintenance endowment for it, they can be your best advocate and can understand. So it's important to carefully validate that goal with your key leaders and your key staff. But understand that campaigns are fun. They're filled with joy, and you bond with leadership and donors for the rest of your life. I still get holiday cards and emails and wishes and shout outs and phone calls from some of the people that I've worked campaigns with. And it's just a joy that they remembered me after all this time. Oh, sure, you taught me da 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 da. I think one of my favorite sayings is, okay, this is not a database. These are suspects, and our job is to move suspects to prospects to qualified prospects to major donors. Where do we start? We start with dissecting the information. So somebody remembered that. I love what I do, and I can see myself do it for quite some more years to come.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Thank you, Jen.
That was Peggy Calhoun, Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive and President and CEO of Miller Calhoun and Company. Peggy and her firm have been involved in raising over $1 billion and helping over 350 charities. That's quite a few successful campaigns. In 2024, Peggy and I plan to team up at the Planet Philanthropy Conference in Orlando from June 3rd to June 5th to share how research and fundraising work together in campaign. I hope to see you there.
Hey there! If you enjoyed this member interview, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with incredible people, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member. I'll see you there.